20 months, not 20 days, 20 consecutive months of one central bank buying gold on almost every single dip, every rally, every panic, every quiet week. And almost nobody watching the Fed today has noticed what that number is quietly telling us. Right now in Washington, a room full of people in suits is deciding whether to change a number by 1/4%. Every financial channel in America is pointed at that room. Every headline today is about one man, Fed Chair Kevin Warsh, and whether he raises rates or holds them steady. But while all of that noise is happening on the other side of the planet, a much quieter decision has already been made. A decision that doesn't care what Warsh says in 20 minutes. A decision that has already outlasted 3 Fed chairs worth of guesswork. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why that quiet decision might matter more to your money than anything said in that press conference. If you're interested in money, investing, gold, silver, and protecting your financial future, subscribe to Money Insights and like this video, because every week we break down the biggest financial stories in simple English. The stories that actually move your savings, not just the headlines. Here's what's happening today, July 29th, 2026. The Federal Open Market Committee wraps up a 2-day meeting this afternoon. At 2 p.m. Eastern, they'll release a statement. At 2:30, Warsh steps to the podium. Markets are pricing in roughly a 70% chance the Fed holds rates steady and a 30% chance of a surprise quarter-point hike. That might sound like a small gap. It isn't. Because unlike almost every Fed chair before him, Warsh has deliberately stopped giving forward guidance. He's told the world, in effect, don't expect me to hint at what comes next, which means for the first time in years, nobody, not traders, not economists, not the algorithms running Wall Street, actually knows what's about to happen. Why should a parent in Ohio or a retiree in Arizona care about a percentage point? Because interest rates touch almost every dollar you have. Your savings account, your mortgage, your retirement fund. When rates go up, borrowing gets more expensive, and historically, gold can come under pressure because investors can earn more just parking cash in a bank. When rates hold or fall, that pressure eases. So today's decision genuinely matters to your wallet. But here's where everything changes, because focusing only on today's decision may be exactly the mistake that cost people the bigger story. Let's rewind to January of this year. Gold hit an all-time high of $5,589 an ounce on January 28th, 2026. Then something unusual happened. Through the spring, gold went through its worst quarterly decline since 2013, down roughly 16% in a matter of months. By June, it had touched lows near $4,002. Today, it's trading around $4,020 to $440. That's still down more than 25% from the January peak. If you only looked at that chart, you might think the gold story was over. Almost everyone did. And that's exactly the moment when the real signal appeared. In June, during gold's worst quarter in over a decade, China's central bank, the People's Bank of China, bought 1,493 tons of gold. Not sold, bought. That single month was its largest purchase since 2023, and it extended something remarkable. 20 consecutive months of buying, the longest uninterrupted streak since at least 2015. Think about what that means. While ordinary investors were watching gold fall and getting nervous, one of the largest and most sophisticated financial institutions on earth was doing the opposite. It was buying more, not less. This is where most financial channels stop the story. They report the number and move on. But the deeper question, the one almost nobody asks, is why would a central bank buy aggressively into a falling market? Individual investors are taught the opposite instinct. When something drops, panic. When it drops more, panic harder. So why does China's central bank behave like it's following a completely different rulebook? Here's the part most people miss. Central banks don't buy gold to make a quick profit. They buy it to change the architecture of their reserves, the giant pool of assets that back their currency and protect their economy in a crisis. And when you look at that architecture, a strange gap appears. According to the European Central Bank's own reporting, gold now makes up roughly 27% of official global reserves. For the first time in modern history, that's more than U.S. Treasuries, which sit around 22%. Gold has quietly become the single largest category of reserve asset, held by the world's central banks combined. Now, here's the number that should stop you. China's own gold holdings represent only about 8.8% of its total reserves. Compare that to the 27% global average. That gap, nearly 20 percentage points, is the real story hiding behind today's Fed headlines. It isn't a short-term trade. It's a structural distance China's central bank appears to be closing, ton by ton, month by month, regardless of what gold's price is doing this week. Why does this matter to you, sitting at home not running a central bank? Because central banks moving in one direction together for years tends to create a floor under an asset that ordinary investors don't see until much later. It's the same reason a shopping cart full of groceries feels heavier every year, even though your paycheck stays roughly the same. A slow structural shift that's invisible day to day, but undeniable over time. But wait. Before you assume this is simple bullish story, here's a contradiction that most gold content creators conveniently leave out. Not every number agrees. Global research from JP Morgan pointed out that central banks, in aggregate, actually sold 129 tons of gold in the first quarter of 2026, led by Turkey's dramatic sale of 60 tons in March. Net reported purchases across all central banks that quarter were only 16 tons, a sharp slowdown from the roughly 225 tons per quarter these institutions had been averaging for years. So which is it? Is the world's central banking community buying gold hand over fist, or has that entire trend quietly stalled? This is the contradiction almost nobody explains clearly. And it's exactly why the headline, "Central banks are buying gold," can mislead you if you don't look closer. The truth seems to be this. It isn't one uniform trend. Some central banks, Poland at points and notably China, have been consistent, deliberate accumulators. Others, like Turkey, Russia, and Venezuela, have recently become sellers, often for reasons that have nothing to do with gold's price and everything to do with their own domestic pressures, funding defense spending, managing sanctions, or shoring up liquidity. The World Gold Council itself acknowledges that a meaningful portion of global central bank purchases go unreported entirely, since there's no mandatory requirement to disclose them to the IMF in real time. So the real signal isn't central banks are buying. It's more precise than that, and more interesting. The institutions with the largest structural gap between their current gold holdings and the global average appear to be the ones still buying through weakness, while institutions facing acute domestic financial pressure are the ones selling. That distinction rarely makes it into a 5-minute market recap, but it might be the single most useful thing to understand about where gold demand is actually coming from in 2026. Now let's bring this back to the Fed, because this is where the two storylines finally collide. According to the World Gold Council's 2026 Central Bank Gold Reserve Survey, 89% of reserve managers globally expect central bank gold holdings to rise over the next 12 months, and a record 45% say they personally plan to add to their own institutions' holdings. That survey was conducted independent of today's FOMC decision. In other words, whatever Kevin Warsh says at 2:30 this afternoon, a large majority of the institutions that move markets over years, not days, have already told researchers where they're headed. Here's a mini cliffhanger worth sitting with. What happens if the Fed does hike rates today? Historically, higher rates make gold less attractive to short-term traders because cash and bonds start paying more for doing nothing. Some analysts, including strategists at Bank of America, have suggested a rate hike here could be justified on inflation grounds, since Fed Chair Warsh himself has publicly said prices are too high, even while acknowledging inflation expectations have started easing. If a hike happens, retail investors and short-term funds might sell gold on the immediate reaction. But if China, and central banks like it, are buying for structural reasons that have nothing to do with this week's headline rate, that selling could be temporary, a short-term dip inside a long-term climb. That's not a guarantee. It's a pattern worth watching, because something similar has happened before. History tells a very different story than most people expect here. Rewind to 2022. That year, central banks bought a record amount of gold, while the Fed was aggressively hiking rates to fight the highest inflation in 4 decades. Conventional wisdom said rising rates should crush gold demand. It didn't. Central banks kept buying anyway because their decision-making horizon wasn't the next Fed meeting. It was the next decade. That historical parallel matters today because it shows structural buyers and short-term traders can move in completely opposite directions for extended periods, and the structural buyers have, historically, been the ones still standing when the dust settles. Let's slow down for a second and picture what any of this actually looks like, because numbers on a screen don't tell the full story. Picture a vault beneath a central bank building, stacked with dull gold bars that don't glitter the way movies show gold. They're heavy, gray-yellow, and utterly unremarkable to look at. Picture a trading floor in New York at 2 p.m. today. Screens flashing red and green the instant Warsh's statement drops. Traders' hands hovering over keyboards. Picture, on the other side of that same moment, a warehouse in a Chinese port city where a shipment of bullion gets logged into a government ledger, a transaction that will barely make a headline outside a handful of trading desks. 2 rooms, 2 decisions, 1 asset connecting them both. Why should any of this matter to a factory worker in Ohio, a nurse in Texas, or a retired teacher living on a fixed pension? Because when a currency's underlying reserves shift, it eventually shows up in everyday life, in how far a paycheck stretches, and what a retirement account is actually worth when it's time to spend it, and in how much a family pays for the same cart of groceries year after year. Retirees living on fixed incomes are often the first to feel inflation's bite, because their income doesn't rise with prices the way a salary sometimes does. Parents saving for a child's education watch a college fund's purchasing power quietly erode if inflation runs hotter than expected. None of this is abstract. It's the difference between a comfortable retirement and a stressful one, between a family vacation that happens and one that gets postponed another year. Now, here's a piece of the puzzle. Almost no coverage of today's meeting mentions who Kevin Warsh actually is and why his instincts run differently than his predecessors. Warsh isn't a career central banker who spent decades inside the Fed's walls. He served on the Fed's Board of Governors from 2006 through 2011, sitting at Ben Bernanke's side through the 2008 financial crisis as Bernanke's primary liaison to Wall Street. Before that, he worked at Morgan Stanley and inside the George W. Bush White House as an economic policy aide. That background matters, because it means Warsh entered this job already skeptical of exactly the kind of conventional wisdom the Fed has leaned on for years. He's publicly called the conventional wisdom his least favorite data point. Some analysts describe him as cyclically dovish, but structurally hawkish, meaning he may prefer lower rates in the short run to support growth, while quietly reshaping how the Fed thinks about inflation for the long run. That combination is unusual, and it's part of why this particular Fed meeting carries more uncertainty than a typical one. Here's another mini cliffhanger. Warsh has created multiple task forces since taking over, groups specifically examining whether artificial intelligence is quietly making the economy more productive without pushing prices higher, and whether the Fed's traditional inflation models even capture that possibility. Those task forces aren't scheduled to report back until later in 2026 and beyond. Some analysts believe that timing itself is strategic. It's that Warsh may be reluctant to commit to a rate hike today, specifically because doing so would undercut the entire premise of task forces he built to answer these questions more carefully on his own timeline, away from the pressure of a single contested vote. Almost nobody noticed this detail either. Several sitting FOMC members have already staked out public positions ahead of today's vote. Dallas Fed President Lori Logan has said a hike would be prudent, arguing inflation does not appear to be on track all the way back to 2%. Cleveland Fed President Beth Hammack has echoed similar concern. Meanwhile, other voices on the committee, reportedly including Vice Chair Philip Jefferson, Governor Lisa Cook, and New York Fed President John Williams, appear to favor patience. One economist described the setup bluntly. For a hike to pass, Warsh would need to make an impassioned case to swing a genuinely split room. That's not a rubber stamp committee. That's a real vote, with a real chance of dissent either way, happening within hours of this video going live. Let's talk about silver for a moment, because it's tangled into this same story in a way most coverage ignores. Unlike gold, silver isn't just a reserve asset sitting in a vault. It's an industrial metal, used in solar panels, electronics, and a growing list of green energy and AI-related hardware. That dual identity means silver gets pulled by two forces at once. The same safe haven psychology driving gold, plus genuine physical supply and demand pressure from factories that need the metal to build things. Some analysts have pointed to a persistent industrial supply deficit in silver. Demand from manufacturers consistently outpacing what mines can produce each year. If that gap continues, it creates a different kind of pressure than gold faces, one measured in factory floors and solder joints, not central bank vaults. It's a reminder that precious metals isn't one story. It's at least two, moving on different clocks. Picture a solar panel factory somewhere outside Shanghai, or a chip fabrication plant in Arizona, both drawing down silver from the same shrinking global stockpile every single day. Whether the Fed hikes rates or not, whether gold is at a record high or in correction. That's the quiet difference between the two metals. Gold's demand story today is largely about vaults and reserves, decisions made by governments over years. Silver's demand story is also about factories and production lines, decisions made by engineers building the next generation of solar farms and electronics, decisions that don't pause for a press conference. When investors lump gold and silver into one conversation, they often miss that silver carries this extra physical pressure that gold simply doesn't have. Here's a contradiction worth sitting with. Historically, silver has often moved in the same direction as gold, just with bigger swings. Traders sometimes call it gold on steroids because it tends to rally harder and fall harder. But if industrial demand for silver keeps outpacing what mines can supply year after year, some analysts argue that relationship could weaken over time, with silver's price increasingly driven by real-world manufacturing needs rather than simply mirroring gold's safe haven appeal. That's not a certainty. It's a pattern some analysts are watching closely, and it's one more reason why lumping gold and silver together as a single trade may miss important nuance. Now, here's an unexpected discovery that reframes everything you've heard about this Fed meeting. Warsh isn't behaving like previous Fed chairs. Since the June meeting, there have been strikingly few public speeches from Fed officials, about half the usual pace seen after meetings since 2022. Warsh has deliberately shortened the Fed's official policy statement, cutting it from roughly 300 words in past releases down to around 130. He's called traditional forward guidance poorly suited to the current moment. He's launched task forces to rethink how the Fed even measures inflation and productivity in an economy being reshaped by artificial intelligence. In plain English, the person steering U.S. monetary policy has openly said the old playbook doesn't fit anymore, and he intends to write a new one in public, meeting by meeting. Why does that matter for you? Because less forward guidance means more volatility, and more volatility historically pushes some investors toward assets seen as stores of value outside the banking system entirely, gold and silver among them. A Fed that refuses to signal its next move isn't necessarily good or bad for markets, it's simply less predictable, and markets, like people, tend to seek comfort in the face of uncertainty. Historically, gold has often been one of the places that comfort gets sought. Here's the bigger pattern connecting everything we've covered. Geopolitics is layered on top of all of this. Oil prices have swung sharply through July amid renewed tension involving Iran, at one point pushing crude up roughly 20% for the month, even as prices pulled back afterward. Reuters reported U.S. forces intercepted an Iranian strike targeting American troops stationed in the Middle East just this week. Energy shocks like that tend to keep headline inflation elevated in the near term, which is precisely the kind of pressure that makes the Fed's decision today so contested in the first place. Some FOMC members reportedly favor holding rates because a hike would essentially validate an inflation problem the Fed hasn't fully diagnosed yet. Others reportedly favor hiking because they worry waiting too long risks the Fed's credibility on price stability. Reports describe the committee as genuinely divided, with at least 2 hawkish dissents expected regardless of the final vote. So picture the full board now. A divided Fed, led by a chair who's deliberately removed the safety net of forward guidance, a geopolitical backdrop that could reignite inflation with a single unexpected event. And underneath all of that daily noise, a slower, again quieter current. Central banks with the largest structural gaps in their reserves, led visibly by China, continuing to accumulate gold through corrections, through inflation scares, through Fed meetings that came and went without changing their behavior at all. Here's the reality check, because this video isn't here to tell you gold only goes up. It doesn't. Gold fell 16% in a single quarter this year. Some strategists, including analysts at OCBC Bank, have forecast further declines toward the $2,175 to $2,194 range by year's end if Treasury yields keep climbing and the dollar keeps strengthening. Buying an asset simply because it's near record highs carries real risk. And commodities markets veterans have pointed out that buying high, hoping for higher, is a genuinely difficult strategy for anyone. Gold's role in a portfolio, according to portfolio strategists, isn't to deliver explosive returns. It's to act as a stabilizer, a smaller allocation that behaves differently than stocks and bonds when those markets get shaky. So what's the actual signal buried underneath everyone's obsession with today's Fed decision? It might be this. Short-term price moves in gold over the next few hours will likely be driven by whatever Kevin Warsh says at 2:30 today. But the multi-year trajectory may be shaped by something almost entirely disconnected from that. A handful of the world's largest reserve managers slowly closing a structural gap that has nothing to do with this week's headline. Markets often react violently to the thing everyone's watching, while the thing that actually compounds over years keeps moving quietly in the background, mostly unreported, occasionally surfacing in a data release nobody outside financial media pays attention to. None of this is a prediction. It could unfold differently. Warsh could surprise everyone with a hike this afternoon. China's central bank could pause its streak next month, just as some of its counterparts already have. Silver's industrial deficit could narrow if new supply comes online. Markets rarely move in a straight line, and anyone claiming certainty about where gold or silver goes next is guessing, however confidently they say it. But here's what you now understand that you didn't 5 seconds into this video. Everyone was watching the Fed today. Few were watching the 20-month pattern sitting quietly beneath it, a pattern that has already survived 3 Fed chairs worth of guesswork, a record-high gold price, a brutal correction, and a geopolitical shock without changing course. That's not a reason to panic, and it's not a reason to blindly buy anything either. It's a reason to understand your own money a little more deeply than the headline in front of you. To ask not just what happened today, but what's been happening quietly for 20 months while nobody was looking. If you learned something new today, make sure to subscribe to Money Insights and like this video. More powerful financial insights are coming next.